This film is dedicated to all veterans that have laid their head on a pillow at their veterans home here in Yountville. To the thousands that have lived here and the thousands that have died here, we honor their service to our country and we honor their memory. The film tells a story of how the home came into being, from the Civil War beginnings to the war in Afghanistan. The Veterans Home has been a part of this community since 1884. It is without question the home has influenced the growth of this beautiful valley. The economic influence has been felt from Napa to Calistoga. The valley would not be the same without the presence of the home. It may be conjectured, but the valley is a better place because of its existence. To the 900 members that live here, this is home. The members all have one thing in common. They all raised their hand and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States with their lives. May the members find peace. A special thanks is given to the administrator of the Veterans Home, United States Navy Commander, retired, Marcella McCormick. Commander McCormick has guided this home since January 2000, and thanks to her leadership, the home is a better place. I am standing in the lobby of a hospital here at the California Veterans Home in Yountville, California. This beautiful hospital is named after Nelson M. Holderman, who was the commandant of this hospital from 1926 to 1953, the year that he died. And he had a dream, and his dream was that one day this hospital would be completed. And he lived to see this dream come true. In 1865, before the war was completed, two veterans of the Civil War shared a tent. Major Stephenson, a surgeon, and Chaplain Rutledge, in their tent, dreamed that one day, when the Civil War was completed, that they would form an organization to take care of disabled veterans, the widows, and the orphans. And they too realized that dream because in 1866, a year after the war was over, they created the Grand Army of the Republic. But this home was still 18 years away from being built. When the Civil War was over in 1865, 2 million federal troops were still in uniform. The war was over and 350,000 soldiers had lost their lives on the battlefield, and 275,000 soldiers were wounded or diseased. In 1865, at the end of the war, it was time for this nation to begin the process of healing. Families had been torn apart. Brothers had been fighting brothers. And the country was filled with widows and orphans. And to the credit of the federal government, they were there for assistance. Hospitals and veterans homes were being established all over the country. And the mood of the country at that time was to help put these poor lives back to order. But the task was going to be immense, and only time could really take care of the problem. Organizations were being created all over the country to fight the cause. And the leading advocate of all of them was the Grand Army of the Republic. In the late 70s and 80s, the veterans that were still living were now pushing their late 40s and 50s, and in those days, that was at the end of their lives. The veterans, after the war, found assimilating back into their communities to be extremely difficult. The veterans had been away for 4 years, and their communities had moved on without them. 4 years sleeping on the dirt or in a tent if they were lucky, bathing when they could, eating when they could, and killing when they had to. And when the war was over, when it's time to return, it was like starting all over again. Now, a small business owner looking to expand his business in 1879, 1880, had to choose between hiring a young man in his 20s with a wife and 2 children, or hiring an old veteran, disabled in most cases, pushing 50. The choice was obvious. The country had moved on, yet the citizens were very supportive. Fundraisers were being held all over the country, and the collection plate was being passed somewhere in the United States every single day. In San Francisco in the late 70s, two organizations came together, the Grand Army of the Republic and the Mexican War veterans. And they came together to provide a home for the veterans who lived here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, to the credit of the Mexican War veterans, they had secured a space in San Francisco that was set aside for this very, very purpose. But once they had an alliance with the Grand Army of the Republic, they realized quite quickly that that space was going to be way too small. So in 1880, J.J. Lyons, the commandant of the San Francisco Post, stood before his encampment and proposed that the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, and the Mexican War veterans look beyond San Francisco, a more suitable location in the country where the members could work and enjoy the countryside. 27 locations had been considered. And on Thanksgiving weekend, 1881, a fundraiser was held, and $20,000 was raised that weekend, with another 20 that had been pledged to come in over the next 2 years. And the site that was chosen was right here in Yountville, here in the Napa Valley. The A.G. Clark place, as it was called, made up of 910 acres with a working farm, was purchased for a price of $17,750. And on April 1st, 1884, 13 eager veterans walked through that door, with another 29 that showed up just a few days later. Major Stephenson and Chaplain Rutledge, the creators of the Grand Army of the Republic, had to be most proud.
Depicted here are some of our Civil War veterans that served our country during this most difficult period. When the home opened the doors on April 1st, 1884, 13 members who had arrived early moved in, with another 29 members arriving a few days later. On the 16th of April, corresponding with the signing of the peace at Appomattox that ended the Civil War, a formal grand opening was held. The new commandant was introduced to the audience, Lieutenant Colonel E.P. Wood from the 17th Illinois Infantry. Colonel Wood was a practicing physician at the St. Helena Hospital. The home was organized and structured under the men that had served during the Civil War, and it was only fitting to have as the first commandant Colonel Wood. In 1883, the construction of the main building began, but it was not completed on April 1st, 1884, when the first men arrived. The first members had to occupy the old farmhouse for their sleeping quarters, having to make do until the new building was completed. The hospital wards and the commandant's quarters and offices were open, but the kitchen had not been finished. Work began with members giving a hand to complete the task of adding a new wing to the main structure. In September, the kitchen was completed with the installation of the cooking range. The new wing also provided a spacious dining room that had been finished by the home members. The dining tables and benches had also been built by the veterans. In the autumn of 1884, the library, which consisted of second-hand books and magazines, was opened in the main building on shelves that had been built by the member carpenters. The hospital wards were large, well ventilated, and were sunny rooms. Because of the crowded conditions, some of the members that were considered healthy moved into the convalescent rooms temporarily. The main building was now completed. The commandant's office and quarters, the hospital, the kitchen and dining room, and the library were all now functioning on the main level, and home members were beginning to move into the upper stories of the structure. 1884 was a tough year because most of the $40,000 raised from the Thanksgiving weekend fundraiser was used to buy the 910 acres and build the first building. The 84 budget was interesting in the fact that it was their first, and with all things being new, it would be a real challenge to stay within the budget restraints. Just some of the expenses are mentioned here to show how encompassing the budget was. The purchase of 2 horses, 2 sets of double harnesses, 2 farm wagons, 1 spring wagon, $1,001.25. The budget also showed paying the commandant's, secretary, and cook's salary of $1,794.88 for the entire year. 3 coffins, $87. And believe it or not, the state of California, $420.61 in taxes. The balance at the end of December 31st, 1884 was $165.63 in the black. During the first year of the home, 102 applications for admissions to the home were approved. 76 were admitted, of whom 9 subsequently left. 1 was discharged and 4 died, leaving 62 in the home December 31st, 1884. In 1885, the home was again becoming overcrowded. The city of East Oakland came through by contributing $2,000 in cash, plus materials and labor to construct the second structure on the home. The new cottage, as it was called, accommodated 40 veterans. Additionally, the ladies of Oakland contributed bedspreads and bedding to allow for immediate use, and the cottage became occupied immediately. By the end of 1885, there were 110 veterans living at their veterans' home in Yountville. In the third year, the home was beginning to find its footing, but the overcrowding was becoming a commonplace. The Grand Army of the Republic stepped forward with cash sum of $5,500 to build a third cottage that would accommodate 48 men. At the close of 1885, 140 men lived at the home. 21 had died, 22 had been discharged at their request, 24 had been discharged for cause, and 3 had been sent to the insane asylum. One of the overriding objectives of the home being situated in the country was to allow for self-sufficiency of the members. All able-bodied members were asked to share in the daily operation of the home. The only activities that allowed for additional revenue to the home was farming, and because it was so important, money from the budget was allocated for equipment, seed, and livestock. About 200 acres of the home lay in the valley along the railroad track. This land was well adapted for raising grapes and grains of various kinds. The residue was on the hills sloping eastward. The hills were covered with oaks, which would furnish an abundant supply of fuel. The entire home at the time of purchase was being provided water by both a stream and well water. In 1883, when the home was originally purchased, there were 30 acres of grapes. The home also had an orchard of apples and peaches. And by 1885, the farming at the home was in full operation. 45 acres of grapes that year produced over 100 tons for the market, and the profit helped in balancing the budget. The home also had 1,000 trees planted to increase the orchards from just apples and peaches to include 5 acres of plum trees. The farming also included beef cattle, chickens, hogs, and dairy cows. The home even raised their own ducks. Members could even fish in the newly constructed reservoir. The home was at best breaking even. To the credit of the state of California, the state was providing yearly support to help with the budget shortfalls, and in time the state would step forward to take control of the entire home. In 1899, with 15 years of struggling, it became apparent that the state of California would have to step forward and take over the home. The state took over the home officially, but left in place the Veterans Home Association that had operated the home so effectively during the 15 previous years. The home in 1899 consisted of 55 buildings that housed over 800 members. From its one building in 1884, the home had expanded into a community that had both electricity, steam heating, water, and sewerage. The members' needs were being provided: comfort, health, and amusement. The home was operated under a military structure. Here are just some of the general orders that had to be followed. General Order Number 4. Any member of the home coming onto the grounds either from an absence with or without leave, in an intoxicated condition and disturbing other members of the home, shall be given a dishonorable discharge. General Order Number 6. All persons are forbidden to pick fruit from, break branches off, or in any way injure the fruit trees of the home. Any member hereafter found in the home orchard or in any way meddling with a fruit tree on the home premise without authority from these headquarters will be discharged from the home. General Order Number 55. All members of the home are required to be in their respective quarters at taps. Company sergeants will report daily at headquarters any violation of this rule, giving in each case the name of the offender, the hour of his return to quarters, and a statement of his condition of sobriety. In 1884, the year the Veterans Home was opened, Yountville was still a one-horse town of only 300 residents. But one of the two hotels had a bar stocked with the choicest wines, liquors, and cigars, and a dining room supplying the best food that the market could offer. Yountville's little downtown began with an 1855 country store that was quickly followed by a saloon, the Sebastopol Exchange, which added a hotel in 1875. Another store came, the White House, and the first blacksmith. There would be 20 smiths in and around Yountville by the 1860s. The settlement's population was nicely mixed. Its early expressman was a Hollander, the wagon maker a Swede, carpenters were a Canadian and a Norwegian, the shoemaker and hoteler were English, the house painter was Irish. There was a laundry, but neither French nor Chinese, but Irish. And of course, early Yountville also had its share of saddlers and harness makers, a carriage painter, a horse trainer, and besides the usual smiths turned furriers or horseshoers. An actual home member that served during the Spanish-American War, 1899.
Philippines in October, and that was a long ways from Manila. We done hiked it up there, and we was then at the foot of the Great Cagayan Mountains. We had a battalion lost in those mountains for 6 months. We had a battalion lost in there from October 99 till March 1900. First went into the regular service.
In the beginning, the administrator was called the Commandant, and the members were called comrades. There was a Veterans Home Association that had a board of directors. Pictured here are the directors in 1906 visiting the home. They're standing in front of the amusement hall. That was when the home was new and the style was very military. The veterans were still acting as soldiers then, and life was more structured and regulated. There was a guardhouse, a marching band, military funerals, revelry and retreat. The barracks or cottages, as they were called, were headed up by home members, and they were called captains, and their deputies were called sergeants. As the decades turned, there was little change with the farming activities. The farm was still the only budgeted item that brought income into the home. And during those early days, the home was nearly self-sustaining. Farm animals were in abundance: horses, sheep, cows and chickens, turkeys and ducks. Fruit and vegetables grew in great measure. Members even grew and cured their own tobacco. Wildlife lived in the hills. Hunting and fishing for trout in the reservoir held high priority on the to-do list. And many of the home members that worked in farming preferred living as close to the work as possible, and thus sprung up numerous small one-room living quarters for those members that preferred them. The all-wooden frame cabins had no wash basins, plumbing, or other amenities, and were molded after an Army tent. 3 windows on a door, space for 2 cots, and forget the electrical wiring and room service. They were lit by kerosene lamps. The farming products not only provided for the home members, but the excess was sold throughout the valley. It was said that a family in need that lived in or around the valley could always come to the home and their food needs would be provided. With an average of 12 funerals per month, a redwood casket would be placed on the horse-drawn caisson, and the procession would wind its way up the steep road to the cemetery. The home 25-piece band playing appropriate dirges with muffled drums would follow the wagon. All available members wearing uniforms and Smokey the Bear hats lined the roadway. With 12 funerals per month, the membership spent a great deal of time walking up and down the hill. The graveyard crew that worked in the graveyard would dig 8 to 10 graves ahead at all times. The graveyard is made up of rock and shale. The crew would drill down 18 to 20 inches and put in a quarter of a stick of 40% dynamite to loosen the shale. The crew would then work another grave while the powder fumes escaped. So it was from one to another. Focal points of activities was always the bandstand. A band concert was held every Sunday afternoon. During the political season, the bandstand was in constant demand. Dances at the recreation building attracted 300 to 500 men and women. Often the crowds were so large, the dance was held outside under a Japanese lantern. When all the in-home activities wore thin, then outside adventure could be obtained by boarding either the electric train that ran from Vallejo to Calistoga or the Southern Pacific train, which also ran through the valley. Frequent accidents beset both the interurban and the Southern Pacific. Workmen and persons walking along the tracks were accidentally electrocuted. Cows would wander onto the path of the oncoming trains. And on at least 2 occasions, men from the Veterans Home fell asleep on the railroad tracks and were crushed. Traveling in those days was truly an adventure. On June the 19th, 1913, the electric line experienced a disaster. Bad tides on the San Francisco Bay had delayed the arrival of the connecting ferry, so when passengers finally boarded train number 6 in Vallejo, the train was running a little late. A number of men, perhaps 20, crowded into the front car, which was for smokers, unfolded their newspapers to begin the ride. Train number 5, which had left Calistoga on time but was running slightly late when pulling out of Napa, headed for Vallejo. Both trains put on speed to make up for the lost time. I could stop here because we all know what's going to happen, but here's the rest of the story. When southbound train number 5 was passing on a single track just south of American Canyon, the motorman saw northbound train number 6 in the distance. He pulled the emergency brake and screamed for the passengers to run from the front car to the back of the train. The 2 trains quickly entered a blind reverse curve and met head-on. Slowing down and empty of most of its passengers, the lead car of number 6 climbed on top of number 5. Its heavy wheels and floors ripped through the lower car, mangling the smokers, several of whom were instantly decapitated. 13 died in all, and more than 40 were injured. The bandstand was built in 1899 as a stage for concerts and as a reviewing stand for inspection marches of home veterans. In his annual report on July the 1st, 1900, Colonel George W. Walt, Commandant at the time, wrote, "Now in the course of construction is a beautiful bandstand, octagonal in design, 16 feet in diameter, of Moorish design with a strong stone foundation extending 5 feet above the ground, and having heavy columns with arched connections supporting a wide cornice with terracotta tile roof." A year later he wrote, "The bandstand placed centrally on the grounds and completed last July forms the foreground to a very beautiful daily ceremony. Retreat is regularly observed by the playing of the home band, at the conclusion of which the flag is lowered and escorted under guard to the administration building." Located behind what is now Section D, Roosevelt, was constructed a new state-of-the-art hospital that is pictured. It served 30 years for the benefit of the members. It was the third hospital on the grounds, and at the time of construction in 1903, the hospital provided open bay wards. It provided little privacy or amenities, but the members were well treated. A second dining room that was built also served as a secondary recreation center, is pictured here. The dining room was built just a little northwest of the bandstand, and this interior picture is taken looking like it was taken inside of a Zeppelin. The current dining room is now located just north of where this dining room was located. In the 20s, the main tree-lined drive at the Veterans Home was called Los Angeles Avenue. This drive reflects the Mediterranean style of landscaping found throughout the entire Veterans Home. The arts are important to the growing home. The wooden structure pictured here was the permanent building to house the Lincoln Theater and the library. It was located where Annex 1 now stands. The theater was large enough to accommodate all members that wanted to attend. Pictured here is a 1915 production. The members appeared to be having a great time, decked out in their finest garb. The library was a welcome retreat from the daily activities. The chapel, built in 1918, was an all-faith chapel designed in late Gothic Revival-style architecture by George McDougall. The Armistice Chapel is on the National Register of Historic Places. It served in later years as the home museum and is now home to our in-home television studio. An actual home member that served during World War I, 1918.
1918.
17, 18,
How old are you now?
91.
91. So what
You'll
kind
catch up someday.
I know. I hope so. What about, what did you do in the service?
In 1926, Colonel Nelson N. Holderman came to the home as commandant, just 2 days after his retirement from the Army Infantry, where his wartime efforts earned him the Medal of Honor, Silver Star, and 3 Purple Hearts, and high awards from France, Italy, and Belgium. Life under Colonel Holderman was military rule. Members stood revelry in retreat on the porches, while the buglers sounded retreat. Duty was everywhere on the grounds. Duty was 5 days a week, and funeral guard was every 2 weeks. Members peeled spuds and onions in the hospital basement and in the mess hall. The uniforms for muster and other times were Civil War blues with yellow stripes on the legs and a cap. In 1926, the developed area of the facility consisted of 98 structures, most of them fire traps. After much legislative cajoling, he raised enough money to build a new hospital and living quarters. Of the domiciliary units, Lincoln Hall was the first completed in 1930, with McKinley, Wilson, and Roosevelt to follow within the next 9 years. Colonel Holderman battled for home improvements, went on for the next 27 years until his death in 1953. Here is a partial list of his accomplishments. The old barracks were built with gingerbread ornamentation and steeples, and these barracks were home to the veterans of the Civil and Spanish Wars. When the state of California took over the home in 1899, the state continued using the barracks throughout the next 30 years. When World War I veterans began coming to the home in numbers, the tired structures became inadequate, and under the direction of one man, Colonel Nelson Holderman, the new fireproof structures began to be built. Squad rooms were large, airy, and well finished. Each member had a wide, comfortable bed, not just a cot, one tall and one short locker, and access to day rooms, lavatories, and other conveniences. Here's a before picture. Here's an after picture. One of the significant accomplishments of Colonel Holderman was the 500-bed hospital that bears his name today. The hospital was built originally in 1932, and it has undergone major expansions over the years. If 1945-1946 was a typical year, the hospital would have received some 1,000 patients and would have performed about 150 operations, major and minor. The X-ray department would have made over 2,000 films. The eye department would have provided over 100 pair of glasses, and the dental department about 350 plates. Pictured here is the home ambulance during those early years. The now current mess hall was built in 1948 and had a floor area of 40,000 square feet for the dining room to accommodate 960, with future additions available to expand to 1,920 in the original plans. There was a kitchen, bakery, and butcher shop. The butcher shop was equipped for preserving, pickling, and preparing all meats. Dairy products were kept separate in their own special refrigeration unit. Cool storage for vegetables were also included. To help feed the home in a typical year, the bakery would produce some 75,000 pounds of bread, the hog ranch some 85,000 pounds of pork, ham, and bacon, and the chicken ranch some 2,400 chickens and 50,000 dozen eggs, in addition to supplies purchased from the outside. The butcher shop did their own butchering, 9 hogs a week, one old boar that weighed 1,180 pounds when it was butchered. The sows raised the pigs in a long shed just west of the present warehouse. The members would babysit all night with them to keep the sows from rolling onto the pigs. The members also cared for the chickens, White Rocks, maybe 15 to 1,800 at a time. A story was told that a few of the members would steal the eggs to cook or boil at the graveyard house. They would take a number 8 nail and punch a hole in each end of the egg and blow the egg out of the shell into a mason jar to take to the graveyard to fry. Chicken George would find the shells with the 2 holes and cuss the rats for stealing the egg yolks. George never got wise. In 1933, the home band became all volunteered. The members of the band before 1933 was given a small stipend, but the Economy Act, as it was known, did away with this important funding. Colonel Holderman knew the importance of the band to lift the morale and spirits of home members. A new band was organized of all volunteers to perform by August of that year. It has been estimated that over 1,100 veterans buried at the home had band music played as part of their military ceremony, rain or shine. The band played for retreats, funerals, concerts, and holidays. The band played appropriate dinner music on Christmas, Thanksgiving, and other holidays. For none of this did the band members receive pay. Here are a few familiar sounds heard every day at the home. During the early years of the home, 1884 plus, the home was blessed with well water, but from year one, money was budgeted to build a reservoir to provide for future growth. The reservoir was completed, and many refinements have been realized since those early days. Pictured here is a construction of the reservoir tank here on the home back in 1906. The reservoir was completely covered in 2008. In 1947, a major step forward was realized when, under the direction of Colonel Holderman, the Rector Dam and Reservoir was completed. The reservoir is 11 miles northeast of the home, just northeast of Yountville. Statistically, the dam is of earth and rock, faced with rock and topped with a concrete parapet 30 feet wide. It is 150 feet high, 910 feet long at the crest, and 900 feet at the base. It will impound 4,500 acre-feet of water. It cost $1,123,000. It was built with federal funds to support the Veterans Home, the Fish and Game, and the Napa State Hospital. The primary user is the Veterans Home, and the home owes much to the persuasive power of Colonel Nelson Holderman for its existence. With 42 years at the Veterans Home, Chief Engineer Borman retires. He had devoted his entire life and skill to the planning, building, and operation of one of the most important state facilities in California. Cleve Borman and Colonel Holderman were an unbeatable twosome who lent their talents and considerable abilities to the development of the home during some of its most important years, when veterans of the Spanish-American War and World War I were in need of care. The Veterans Home baseball facility, Borman Field, is a living monument to his dreams to build the best veterans home possible. A state law enacted in 1862 and amended with additions in the early 1900s restricted alcohol within 1.5 miles of any state prison and the Yountville Veterans Home. The town of Yountville was less than a mile from the home and fell under this state law. Pictured here in 1953 is an aerial view of Yountville before the Highway 29 bypass was constructed. Everyone living in the home knew that when the proprietor of a place in Yountville asked if you wanted to see the blind pig, he or she really meant, "Do you want some alcoholic refreshment?" Frank Lacosta ran a blind pig in Yountville. 3 customers ratted on him, and he was sentenced to 180 days in the county jail and forced to pay a $500 fine. The law led to the development of a bustling taxi cab industry in and around Yountville in the mid-1900s, driving members outside the 1.5-mile radius of the home. Edwin Wilson, the old postmaster at the Veterans Home, fell to the illness of the times. The root to his downfall was another intoxicant, love. He met a much younger woman from Southern California who claimed to have psychic powers. Swept away in an ecstasy of infatuation, Wilson brought her gifts. She claimed to see images of things she desired, clothing, jewelry, and a crystal ball, and whatever she reported seeing, Wilson acquired for her. Pretty soon, he ran through the savings. In order to keep her satisfied, he dipped into the funds of the post office. By the time he was caught, he had embezzled $2,201.64 to make his girlfriend very happy. He was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison. A current home member that served during World War II, 1941 to 1946.
And in that short period, from the middle of November to the end of November, I got 2 Purple Hearts for being wounded, and I earned a Silver Star. And the shell that got me killed the battalion commander. It dropped between us. I was talking to him, and it dropped between us, and that ended my wartime career. I was shipped to England and back to the States, spent over a year in the hospitals, finally got out on the 16th of May, 1946.
This photo was taken as the members were called to assemble in full military uniform for marching drills. This photo is taken at the end of an era as the home transitioned into a more civilian lifestyle and attire. With the passing of Colonel Nelson Holderman, the home paused for a moment to reflect on the home's true hero. But the home is bigger than any one man, and today, the home members have moved on. In the mid-40s, with World War II veterans returning from combat, the home was gearing up for the returning veterans. In 1948, the California legislature appropriated $4,460,000 for the Veterans Home, earmarked for expansion. In the mid-80s, the Federal Veterans Administration set aside $80 million for home improvements to renovate open bay dorms that housed up to 20 members into private and semi-private rooms. The renovation is now completed, and the military daily structure has been eliminated. The home today has taken on a look and feel of the finest in retirement care. Member fees are utmost in the minds of members since the Veterans Home came into existence. From a historical perspective, let's take a look at the justification on how member fees developed through the years. States are not required by law to maintain veterans' homes. It is a voluntary effort and was first undertaken around the country 130 years ago. The cost has been shared by a financial partnership between the states, the federal government, and the veterans who receive the care. This partnership has worked well as a shared program that results in quality residential health care for the aged or disabled veterans. The state of California has been a part of the home from the inception. The California legislature approved on March 7, 1883, an appropriation of $150 per annum for each aged person in indigent circumstances residing in the veterans home who had been a resident of the state for 3 years. The total of all such appropriations was limited to $15,000 per annum, and the amount of the pensions by the members was to be surrendered to the home to offset the state reimbursement. The reality was that most members had very little or no pensions at all. The first law authorizing a federal sharing of state costs to alleviate the burden on state taxpayers was approved by President Grover Cleveland in 1888. Through federal funding to the states in the form of construction grants and per diem payments, the VA promotes the care and treatment of veterans in state homes in order to provide quality care for an ever-increasing aging veterans population. By state law, the home is authorized to collect members' fees not to exceed 18% of the general fund's appropriations for the home. The general fund supports 58% of the total annual budget. The remaining 42% comes from the reimbursements such as Medicare, Medi-Cal, VA per diems, and so forth. The bottom line is that for every dollar the Veterans Home collects in fees from its members, the state of California and the federal government contributes $9. The home today would not be recognized by their early comrades as they were called. The members today live in private and semi-private rooms. Members are provided cable television and are served 3 meals a day without having to wash the dishes, tend to the hogs, or clean the chicken coops. Members today have no clothing restrictions as to attire and can go and come as they please. Members can do little or take advantage of the many opportunities available. The golf course is available Monday through Thursday at no charge to the members, and members receive free range balls 7 days a week. The course is a challenging 9-hole executive track that would give even the best golfers a test. At the end of the day, the members can roll a few lines in the in-house 6-lane bowling alley, again at no charge. The Veterans Home Library offers all standard services found in any public library, but in addition, DVDs can be checked out again at no charge. The home has a swimming pool that is shared with the Yountville community, but the home members have access to the pool during the hours that are set aside just for the members of the home. The Activities Department provide a full monthly calendar of events, of movies, shopping excursions, dining out, and athletic events, including the San Francisco Giants and the 49ers. And for those members who prefer the East Bay, the Oakland Raiders, and the Oakland Athletics. The members can choose to do nothing and still enjoy the beauty that surrounds them. The Alameda, the centerpiece of the home, has 379 trees that is comprised of 105 species from around the world. A veteran can stroll the Alameda or choose a resting spot beneath this historical umbrella. The Yountville of today, from its humble beginnings in the 1850s, is today a city of over 3,000 residents. The town is a tourist destination from visitors around the world. From culinary cuisine to the best and fine wines, Yountville has few equals. A home member that served during the Korean conflict, 1951 to 1953.
I started in 1950, first hitch, until 1953, and then I came out in 1953 and re-entered in 1953 until 1956. I was captured at Port Chop on the last day. Maybe furious. Get caught in a position like that. I went through quite a bit, and then at that point in time, it does happen. I later escaped with 13 others.
The Veterans Home of California is a special place among all veterans homes throughout the United States. The early home got its funding from individuals who cared deeply for the welfare of those men that had sacrificed for this country during the Civil War. Primarily, contributions came from veterans supporting veterans. The home was started with less than $40,000, and almost half of the funds went to the purchase of the land. The rest of the funds went to the cost of constructing the first building that would become the centerpiece of the home. Other veteran homes throughout the nation relied on fundings from their state or from the federal government. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and on occasion over $1 million, were used to fund these early veterans homes. The Veterans Home at Yountville is unique. The state of California purchased the home for $10 and a gold piece in 1899. The home had been in operation for 15 years, and the value of the time of purchase was over $320,000. The California Veterans Home here in Yountville is truly the pearl of the valley. I am standing in the middle of a cemetery here at the California Veterans Home here in Yountville, California. I am surrounded by over 5,500 veterans that are buried here from all of the wars. Reflected here in these headstones are 130 years of history of both men and women who all have one thing in common.
They raised their hand to give a solemn oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States with their lives. And for that, we honor them here today. Few that are buried here under the canopy of these trees, both oak and pine, actually lost their lives on the battlefield, but all of them have pledged and given an oath to protect our freedoms. Of the many that are laid to rest here in these hallowed grounds, I would like just for a few moments to reflect on just a few that served our country during the Civil War. It is because of their service to our country that there is a veterans home here in Yountville. Laid here to rest are 2,308 Civil War veterans that have served our nation. The Civil War death toll is greater than all of the other wars combined that followed. The Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean conflict, the Vietnam War, the war in Iraq, and the war in Afghanistan combined would not total the deaths that occurred during the Civil War. Over 600,000 men perished to preserve our freedoms and our nation, and we honor them here today. 2,308 Civil War veterans here at the Veterans Home in Yountville.